Hey everybody, and welcome back to Geekologists, where today I'm going to be taking on one of the most complicated storylines in the history of video games, The Legend of Zelda. It seems that the longer a game franchise exists, the more complicated its timeline becomes. This is especially true for one of the oldest and most popular game series of all time, The Legend of Zelda. Link has been rescuing Hyrule and its neighbors from peril since 1986, but do each of these adventures share a timeline, or are they a series of standalone stories? I'll be revealing plot points only as they are relevant to later events of the timeline, but in case you missed the warning at the beginning of the video, it's important to note that this video will contain major spoilers. The timeline of the Zelda series was hotly debated among fans until the recent release of the official Hyrule Historia, where the writers at Nintendo finally outlined the detailed history behind the games. But what this history revealed about the placement of the games came as a bit of a surprise. While all the games share a single history, they eventually split off into 3 separate timelines. The shared history is commonly referred to as the Unified Timeline, and begins with the events of Skyward Sword. In Skyward Sword, Link discovers his destiny as the chosen hero of the goddess, and sets out to rescue his friend Zelda from the evil entity Demise. When Demise is finally defeated, he uses his dying breath to warn that his hatred will take shape as a new being, who will be locked in an eternal struggle against the descendants of the great goddess and future incarnations of the legendary hero. Next in the timeline, we have the events of Minish Cap, where Link's hat is a bird thing, followed by the events of Four Swords, wherein Link obtains the legendary Four Sword, which magically splits him into 4 separate links to give him the strength to fight the wind spirit Vati. Once Vati is defeated, he's sealed inside of the Four Sword, and the 4 links are merged back into one. The final game of the Unified Timeline is the wildly popular Ocarina of Time. At the end of Ocarina of Time, Link defeats Ganon, and Princess Zelda then sends him back to when he was a child to warn her about Ganon's actions and prevent the events of Ocarina from ever happening. From this attempt to change Hyrule's history, we get 3 different timelines based on different courses of events that happen directly after Ocarina of Time. The first of these timelines is called the Child Timeline. It takes place after the Link of Ocarina arrives back in his childhood and warns Zelda about Ganon. Link then departs the castle and eventually falls down a crevasse into the land of Termina, leading to the events of Majora's Mask. After rescuing the land of Termina from certain doom, Link departs and spends the rest of his life regretting the fact that since his great deeds took place in an alternate timeline and at the bottom of a pit, no one would ever remember him as a hero. So in order to ensure that the skills he learned would be properly passed on, he preserved his spirit to await the appearance of the next legendary hero. That hero is the protagonist of Twilight Princess, who uses the skills taught to him by the previous Link to rescue Hyrule from Ganon and the forces of the Twilight Realm. The final game in this timeline is Four Sword Adventures, a sequel to the original Four Swords. In Four Swords Adventures, Vati escapes from the Four Sword after Link is forced to draw it from its shrine to protect Zelda. He is once again split into 4 links who set out to defeat Vati. But once Vati is defeated, it's revealed that he had been manipulated by Ganondorf. But with Zelda's help, he's defeated again and sealed into the Four Sword, which is then locked back in its shrine and protected by a magical barrier. The second of the 3 timelines is called the Adult Timeline. When Zelda sends Link back to his childhood at the end of Ocarina of Time, somehow nothing changes and Hyrule is left to recover from Ganon's attack without the help of its greatest warrior. The first adventure in this timeline is Wind Waker. Ganon once again returns to attempt to overthrow Hyrule, and with Link gone, his evil spreads across the land. The desperate people pray to the goddess to help them repel Ganon. In answer, the goddess flooded the land, and Ganondorf and his minions were sealed along with Hyrule in an enchanted air chamber at the bottom of the sea, with the Master Sword serving as the key, suspending the flow of time within the chamber. Ganon eventually finds a way to destroy the magical properties of the Master Sword, allowing him and his minions to escape Hyrule. The protagonist of Wind Waker comes from a small island whose people worship the story of the hero of time. After his sister is kidnapped by one of Ganon's servants, he is drawn into a quest to obtain the Master Sword. Discovering that it no longer has the power to repel evil, he sets out to restore its godly protection. With the sword once again at full strength, Link deals the death blow to Ganon, stabbing him through the head. Shortly after the events of Wind Waker, we get Phantom Hourglass, whose protagonist is the same Link from Wind Waker. After Phantom Hourglass comes Spirit Tracks, which brings the adult timeline to its current conclusion. The third and currently longest alternate timeline is called the Fallen Hero Timeline. These games take place in an alternate history where, despite all his heroic efforts, Link is defeated and killed by Ganon at the end of Ocarina of Time. The first 4 games of this timeline follow a single incarnation of Link. The first of these four is Link to the Past. In Link to the Past, we learn that Ganon and his armies were banished back into the Sacred Realm by the Hylians after a long and brutal war. The entrance to the Sacred Realm is sealed by the Seven Sages, and life in Hyrule eventually returns to normal. However, sometime later, the evil wizard Aghanim kidnaps 6 descendants of the Sages and uses their power to free Ganon. Link receives a telepathic message from the 7th and final descendant, Princess Zelda. He is then sent on a quest to gather the 3 Pendants of Virtue and the Master Sword to defeat Ganon. The popular Oracle duology take place shortly after the events of Link to the Past. Following these adventures, Link sets sail for a new land, but his ship is caught in a storm and sinks. Link later washes up on the shore of an island and is taken in by some of its residents. Link learns that in order to leave the island and continue his journey, he must first find and awaken the Windfish, but in a strange twist, he discovers that the island is actually the fish's dream. Nevertheless, Link does eventually find a way to wake the fish up, and then he himself awakens floating on a piece of the ship's wreckage. Next in this timeline is the most recent addition to the Zelda franchise, A Link Between Worlds, where a strange sorcerer named Yuga tries to revive Ganon by capturing Princess Zelda in a painting. Yuga is eventually defeated, and Ganon remains sealed away in the Sacred Realm. Oddly enough, this timeline ends with the first 2 games ever released in the Zelda franchise, The Legend of Zelda and The Legend of Zelda 2: Link's Adventure. In the first of these 2 games, Ganon returns to attempt to steal the Triforce of Wisdom from Princess Zelda, but is defeated and killed by a young boy named Link. 6 years later in this game's sequel, Link must seek out the final piece of the Triforce to awaken an ancient incarnation of Princess Zelda while fighting off Ganon's remaining armies, who plan to revive the villain by mixing his ashes with the blood of his killer. Wait, what? Really? Mix ashes with blood of his killer. Wow, that's creepy. But whatever floats your boat, Nintendo. Anyway, Link manages to retain possession of his bodily fluids long enough to obtain the final Triforce and bring us to what is for now the end of this last timeline. I have to say that the idea of Hyrule having 3 divergent timelines really adds a depth to the story and helps ensure that Nintendo can keep making up any sort of plot they want and find a way to make it fit into the established canon. But most importantly, it should make you appreciate the awesome creativity behind Ocarina of Time even more. You should probably go dig it out and play it again. No, seriously, why are you still here listening to me when you could be playing Ocarina of Time? Go on, get going! Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Feel free to leave me a comment down below to let me know what you thought of the show, or if you have a request for a future episode. Also, make sure you don't miss a second of Geekologists by hitting that subscribe button so I can let you know anytime I upload something new. And once again, thanks for watching.